So good afternoon, friends. Of course, we have here many persons who are not perhaps aware of FDPPI. So I need to actually say a few words about FDPPI as well as about this particular event before we start with the panel. FDPPI is a foundation of data protection professionals in India. As the name indicates, it represents the professionals who are working in the data protection area. When we look at data protection area, we are not restricting our focus to only people who hold, let us say, a designation as a data protection officer or something like that. We feel that data is today the central focus of any industry. It is actually a raw material for most of the industries, particularly in the IT segment. That is the only raw material from which finished products are developed. In other cases, it is used as a tool towards various production of either a data product or a non-data product. We are talking of Industry 4.0 and something like that, where data becomes the crucial input into the manufacturing process itself. So data being of such great importance, ensuring that data is properly secured has always been a matter of interest to the industry. And this data protection industry in the initial sense actually meant information security, because that is where it all started long time back, when IT started relying on data, securing the data in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability was very important for the use of data and how it can be made reliable. So assurance of data was one of the important requirements. So there were a lot of IT professionals who were perhaps proficient in network security, perhaps in encryption, perhaps working as a CISO or a CTO kind of areas. Now, all of them are in a way data protection people, but over a period of time, the community of people who were expected to protect the privacy of an individual, when the personal information of the individual is in data form, that category of people became very important in terms of law, because we know that every country tries to protect the privacy of an individual if it's a democratic society. India also has adopted privacy as a fundamental right of a citizen, and Supreme Court expected the government to take suitable action to ensure that privacy is protected. But when we try to protect privacy, there was an issue that if information is in data form, then without protecting data in some form, you could not protect privacy. Therefore, privacy protection actually waded into the IT area and looked at protecting a certain kind of data. In fact, courts in India call this as information privacy. That is, trying to provide a right to an individual to ensure that his personal information is not used in a manner which he doesn't want it to be. That kind of right is what is recognized as the privacy protection right. And the community is concerned more when that information is in data form, because when personal information is in data form, it is more difficult to protect it because it can be easily duplicated. It can be actually sent from one place to another place at the speed of the light. And many times the data can be duplicated. In all cases, data can be duplicated. So data will be in one place. At the same time, it may also be in the other place. So the person who held the data earlier may not even realize that his data has been stolen, because a thief of data doesn't dispossess the original holder of the data. He only makes a silent copy and walks away. Because of these characters of data, the protection of privacy, when information about an individual became data, was considered to be more difficult than protecting privacy when it was in paper form or something like that. That is why there were separate legislations for data protection, which said that whoever is possessing the personal information of an individual, he has to follow certain norms of security. Therefore, data security, the term which we use today, actually represents personal data security. Whereas the CISOs have always been protecting data of all kinds in their custody. Out of all the data they protect, one part of the data, which is called personal data, became a more difficult part to handle. It was like a volatile chemical in an inventory of a manufacturing company's godown. Handling the protection of this personal data was getting more and more difficult, because law tried to impose huge liabilities if personal data is not protected properly. If the entire data, when we are looking at it as a canvas, the data universe, if it is not protected, there is a data breach. We call that a cyber crime. And there are cyber crime laws in India, like Information Technology Act, which says that anybody who has suffered a damage on account of a loss of such information, he can seek the protection of the court. Police will come in, or the adjudicator will come in and provide you some kind of a relief. So data as a whole, when it was lost, the protection came in the form of cyber crime laws, protected through various legislative systems. But when it came to personal data, though personal data is also data, the entire global community felt that this needs to be protected more than the data which was otherwise being protected for the interest of the company. If I have got a data is my asset, I have to protect it, therefore I protect it, is one issue. But when we come to personal data, this data belongs to a person, and that person has entrusted that personal data to me for a certain purpose. And while I use that, actually I have to ensure that the data is used only for the purpose for which it has been entrusted to me. This was the principle, because of which personal data protection assumed great importance, and therefore the term data protection today we normally use with reference to personal data protection. So those are the people who are there as DPO or data protection officer in an organization, but it doesn't mean that the CISO is not a DPO. It doesn't mean the HR manager is not a DPO. It doesn't mean the business manager is not a DPO, because all of them are interested in protecting data. And therefore, when we say foundation of data protection professionals represents the data protection professionals as a category, we are including not only the DPOs designated, or the CISOs, CIOs, or the lawyers. Many of the lawyers who are there either within the company as corporate counsels, or maybe practicing outside. So this is a broad, you can say, the membership criteria of our Foundation of Data Protection Professionals, FDPPI, which is registered as a company in 2018 under what is called Section 8, which is a not-for-profit company, and it is protected. It is actually registered as a company limited by guarantees. The basic objective of this organization is to ensure that the data protection ecosystem in the country, which consists of data protection professionals, it also consists of the companies. it also consists of the government. See, all are different stakeholders. Say, I as an individual want data to be protected because I want to protect my privacy. But some company XYZ, okay, is interested in data protection because it is in the business of using data for some purpose, which is a legitimate purpose for the community benefit. But I am willing to provide my personal information to them under certain conditions. If they don't follow those conditions, we want law to catch them. Therefore, there is always a sort of a watch on companies which are using personal data. But if you put yourself in the shoes of that company, you can say that for that company, personal data is a means of, you can say, survival, doing business. There are certain legitimate interests which law also recognizes. So that is also part of the ecosystem. Then comes the government. Many times we look at government as an enemy of the industry, particularly in the privacy scenario. But actually, government has got a duty to protect the community, which is a sort of a security obligation. So therefore, if I have to complain about my personal data not being protected, that has to be protected only by the government. So government has got always a overarching responsibility to protect data. Plus, when data is used for committing cyber crimes, the government always has a duty to protect the rest of the citizens from the difficulties arising out of misuse of data. So therefore, government is a stakeholder in personal data protection as a user and as a sovereign entity which has to protect the community. We have today situations where government is a repository of a huge number of personal data, whether it is Aadhaar or whatever is that, and they need to protect it in a proper manner. At the same time, they cannot do without collecting the data because that data is collected for the purpose of providing some kind of beneficial services to the citizens. Therefore, we recognize that this data protection community consists of individuals whom we are representing specifically, but the ecosystem consists of companies, individuals, and the government. And ultimately, all these people have to work harmoniously. For example, when we talk of right to privacy, there is always a counter thing called right to freedom of expression, right to security, or right to information. You cannot say that my privacy right is sacrosanct and I don't bother about what happens to you. So the legislators are always at the problem of finding a balancing between these different rights. In fact, the reason why India has taken so long to actually come up with a data protection regulation is because of this conflicting viewpoints. Because long time back, there was a Shah committee, and then in 2006 itself, there was a Personal Information Protection Act, which was bill which was legislated. It lapsed, and subsequently Information Technology Act was amended in 2008 to bring certain data protection regulations. All that was not sufficient, and now we are coming up with the Personal Data Protection Act, which is presently in the form of a bill, and it has come to an advanced stage where a joint parliamentary committee is almost in the finalizing stage, and maybe in the next budget session it may become a law. So FDPPA recognizes that protection of data is not exclusively protecting privacy, but the privacy activists, along with this CISO kind of a person, technology person, and the business manager who wants to use the data, they all have a stake in the personal data, including the government, and that is the basic concept under which the FDPPA has set its objectives. Towards meeting this end, FDPPA does a lot of empowerment programs like certification programs. We have something called Certified Data Protection Professional. We have got multiple modules. We have got one module which is on Indian law. When I say Indian law, many people say India doesn't have a law. How do you have a certification on the law? But we say that Information Technology Act itself is the Data Protection Act of today, though we might not have recognized, because in 2008 it was amended and notification came in 2009, and 2011 the rules came. And since then, we have got what is called a section 43A there, which talks about reasonable security practices, which is nothing but an abridged version of a Personal Data Protection Act. And that has been there since 2011, though we have not recognized that India has a Personal Data Protection Act. And in today's juncture, what has happened is, when the Data Protection Bill is there under discussion, in the back end, there was IT Act, and section 43A talked about reasonable security practice, and the word reasonable included the due diligence aspect of an organization. In today's context, organizations will not be compliant with section 43A of Information Technology Act if they are not compliant with the PDP bill. Bill is still a bill, not an act. But bill is the intention of the government. So if I'm looking at the due diligence of an organization, if I am the CEO of an organization and I'm looking at how to protect data under section 43A, I have to not only take into account what are the intentions of legislators in India, I have to also see what is happening globally. If GDPR has come in 2018, that has brought certain changes in the concepts. I have to keep that in mind. If data breaches happen somewhere else, even outside India, I have to keep in some kind of a focus, why that data breach happened, how I can prevent it. So this kind of due diligence aspect means that India already has a data protection legislation. So we have the Certified Data Protection Professional, Module I, which discusses the current law as well as the Data Protection Bill, which is the forthcoming law. We also have certification programs in global laws, which covers GDPR, CCPA, Singapore law, Dubai law, now Brazil law. See, every country wants to come up with a law. And it is not true that all laws are similar. Most of it is similar, but there are a few changes here and there, and that becomes the non-compliance aspect to a company if they are interested in compliance. And everybody is talking of huge penalties. Initially, we thought of 2%, 4%, which GDPR introduced as a norm. This 2% and 4% is of global turnover. And it can be applied for simple things like non-compliance of not appointing a DPO, not doing a data protection impact assessment, something like that. See, the beauty of, you can call it as a beauty, or you can call it as whatever else, of this data protection laws is that while the cybercrime laws like Information Technology Act came into being only when there was a loss suffered by a victim. A crime should have happened, money should have been lost, something should have been lost, then the act will come in. Whereas today, under the the data protection laws, what happens is that even when there is no data breach, just for non-compliance, company can face a liability of this 2%, 4%, and if you are taking some guidance from Singapore law, it can even go up to 10% of the turnover. So it is something which is huge enough for business managers and CEOs to completely lose sleep if data breaches could happen. So FDPPI wanted to actually ensure that India does not fall behind the world in implementing data protection laws. So immediately after GDPR came into existence in May 2018, we thought that a lot of Indian companies are providing services to European companies or even US companies who in turn bring the EU data. So we felt that GDPR had a big impact on Indian data processing industry, and we wanted the industries to be fully aware of the impact of data protection laws, and therefore we started this FDPPI, and it has made quite a good progress. Now after the CDPPI and G modules, 2 modules, we are planning to have 3 more modules which will actually create a 360 degrees proficient data protection professional The other three modules are one on technology, one on data audits, and one on behavioral skills. So this is something which the FDPPA is contributing to the ecosystem. In addition to this, for the industry, we are trying to bring a new framework for implementation called PDPSI, which is Personal Data Protection Standard of India, which is an affordable, you can say, unified system of compliance, which will help one single company exposed to multiple data protection laws to adopt a single framework to be compliant with most of the laws. See, the problem today what Indian companies is, because we are a data processing hub, simultaneously, even if it is a small or a medium-sized company, we have data from US, we have data from Singapore, we have data from some EU country. And if I want to be compliant, I have to be compliant with GDPR, with CCPA, and another New York law or something else. So it is not an easy thing that I will have one compliance team which will take care of it. Just as in our Indian system, we have built GST as one country, one tax. We want industries to have one compliance framework for multiple laws, and PDPSI tries to achieve this. After these two, we are also introducing a Data Disputes Mediation and Arbitration Center as something which specializes in resolving disputes related to personal data protection acts of various countries, because this is a very specialized area and it is much beyond the complications which say an act like Information Technology Act brought in. This is much more complicated because the definition of a data principle, definition of personal data, it varies from country to country, and therefore resolving disputes is a tough thing. So we are creating a platform on a ODR basis, online dispute resolution basis, and let experts do mediation or even arbitration using this platform. And if some expertise is required from our FDPPA members, they will be part of it. But it doesn't mean that only FDPPA members have to use this platform. The concept is that there should be a platform specializing in data protection regulations and resolving their disputes, because our Indian law is going to mandate grievance redressal mechanism as one of the requirements. So therefore, FDPPA is into that area of dispute resolution. Additionally, of course, we are trying to reward the people. We are instituting a national award for a champion data protection professional. We are putting the systems for proper evaluation, collection of information. In the end of the next year, we will have a recognition of that nature to actually motivate professionals. But we also believe the uniqueness of our award system is when we want to recognize one individual, we know that that individual's performance is not an individualistic performance. The team around him has supported, his own company has supported. Therefore, our award will be for the individual along with the team, which is the champion team, along with the company, which is the company which has enabled a champion team and a person to develop. So that kind of award system we have introduced. We will be having it by the next year. Additionally, we are coming up with the Data Protection Journal of India, hopefully a good manual for any data protection official for dissemination of knowledge. So there are various activities we have undertaken to strengthen the ecosystem, and we are requesting all data protection professionals to come and join this as a movement, because we are not a government organization, we are not funded by government, we are not funded by large corporates, we don't have hefty membership fees. This is actually a bottoms-up company kind of a thing. That is, the data protection professionals come together and form themselves into an organization for providing some kind of a support to this ecosystem. And I would expect a lot of individuals to join together and form this particular organization. So this is a basic introduction of FDPPI. more about this, you can always, if you are into BTS, okay, that is the Bangalore Tech Summit, we have a stall there. But of course, this Indian Data Protection Summit 2020, which is the first of the kind of summit, which we are spreading it out over these 3 days, 2 sessions on each day, covering different aspects of data protection. We are doing it on Zoom platform. So even if you are not attending the Bangalore Tech Summit, you can still attend this. But if you are attending the Bangalore Tech Summit, you will also be gathering information about IT, BT and other things. And you will understand that wherever you go, somewhere, something about data protection will hit your mind. And you can come to this Data Protection Summit and gather more information. So with that introduction, I once again welcome all of you to this first day of this Data Protection Summit. And hopefully over the next 6 sessions, we will be able to have various kinds of experts with years of experience in data protection. I have not tried to calculate the aggregate experience of all my members, but I'm calling it as mine because I'm one of the promoters and chairman of this, that's all. Otherwise, this belongs to all the people. So the aggregate experience of this is so huge that we are representing a really huge force of knowledge. And out of this several people, about 24 of them will be participating in our 6 panel discussions and perhaps try to share their knowledge. I would invite the participants to take the trouble of posting their questions on the chat box so that we will be able to directly clear their doubts. So friends, thank you. And now I think I will hand it over back to our Kampesh Samyogita to take the next session and open it out. Okay. Samyogita, volume, you just check up.
Now audible?
Yeah, please go ahead. Slightly talk a little louder.
Naavi sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
No, you're not fully audible, at least to me. I'm an old man. Yeah?
Better?
No, I think your system, some tweaking is required. Otherwise, you come near the mic and speak.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So today on the speakers, we have Sudarshan Madhyam, Ritesh Bhatia, and Dr. Mahendra Limai. I would introduce Sudarshan Madhyam. Mr. Sudarshan Madhyam Narsi Wadiyar is a native of Bangalore and as an electrical engineer graduated from BMS College of Engineering. Sudarshan has been a pioneer and is among the first group of bankers in 1980 to automate banking operations in India, and among the first batch of 4 CISAs who qualified from India in 1990. Over a period of 47 years, he has worked with the government, public and private sectors. He has worked for 5 third-party certification bodies. He's also been a business owner in Dubai. We welcome Sudarshan to today's discussion as a panelist. With line we have Mr. Ritesh Bhatia, who is a well-known cybercrime investigator and cybersecurity and data privacy consultant with an experience of 20 years in cyberspace. He is 2-time TEDx speaker and a certified fraud examiner from ACFE USA and is popularly known for his cybercrime investigations. He has also been successful in solving many large corporates, organizations, law enforcement agencies, celebrities and individuals in India as well as abroad. He is on board of many companies serving as cybersecurity consultant and auditor. He has been instrumental in securing systems and critical business information from cyber attacks. We welcome you, Ritesh, for today's discussion. Next, we have Dr. Mahendra Limai, advocate and a doctor Mahendra Limai, a techno-legal expert in cybersecurity and cyber legal education. He's a diploma holder in mechanical engineering, master's in law, and postgraduate diploma holder in cyber law and information technology. And has been awarded PhD in cyber laws from RTM Nagpur University. He's a certified data privacy professional. He has provided cyber legal consultation to more than 10,000 people across India. Through his unique venture, Cybercrime Helpline, he has provided monetary relief about 1 crore to various cyber fraud victims till date. He is practicing cyber litigation as specialized domain and has represented clients before various educating officers including Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Assam, Telangana. We welcome all our eminent panelists for today's discussion on the topic, recent data breach incidents and PDPA of India. Over to the panelists, Mr. Limai, Ritesh Bhatia, and Sudarshan Madhyam. Over to you also.
Hello, friends. I will be acting as the anchor for the panel discussion. Basically, this panel is going to discuss about recent data breach incidents which has been recorded in India, and how the Personal Data Protection Act, whenever I talk of PDPA, please remember that I am talking of the current bill, Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, which when it becomes an act will be called Personal Data Protection Act. So if I use the term PDPA, please remember that I am talking of the forthcoming law. So we would like to discuss about some of the data breach incidents which have happened in India in recent days, and then perhaps be able to relate that to the data protection laws as is existing today if possible, and also to the forthcoming law. We have experts here like Sudarshan Mandiyam, who know the GDPR laws reasonably well, so we can take some kind of learning out of it. We have Ritesh Bhatia, who is a forensic expert who has handled a number of cyber crime investigations, and we have Dr. Limai, who is a very experienced advocate who has handled a number of adjudication cases in India. When I say adjudication cases, many people will not know that that is a system which is suggested in Information Technology Act for resolution of the civil claims. And there are only a few people in India who have been working on that, starting with me in 2004. And Mr. Limai is one of the prominent advocates who is handling the cyber crime issues. So we have both local cyber crime law experts, a lawyer, as well as an international law expert. So we will be looking at the data breach incidents from that context. Now, to start with, I would like to draw the attention of Mr. Ritesh to some of the recent data breach incidents which we have come to know. Like, for example, a few months back, we had, of course, the Breach Candy Hospital in Bombay. But after some time, suddenly, a couple of data breaches in the health industry, like Dr. Lal Pathlabs was there, and Dr. Reddy's was there, Lupin Laboratories was there, in between Cognizant was there, and also Big Basket was there. Now, all these data breach incidents, plus anything more which comes to you, I would like you to give your views on what kind of personal data breaches are represented by these incidents, and what is the extent of damage, and what is your take on that?
Okay, so thank you, Naavi sir and FDPPI for this wonderful opportunity. It's always great to be on the same platform as Naavi sir is there. So Naavi sir, to answer your question, firstly, what kind of fields go out whenever there is a data breach? We generally whenever we read reports, what is that one thing that they say? No, you don't have to worry because we don't store financial information about our customers. And what about other things? What about my name? My age is there. My gender is there. my date of birth is there, my email ID is there. Fine, you don't have my one password, you don't have my financial information, but you have a lot many other things. Like for example, when you speak about big basket, there are quite a lot of chances that how much of like shopping work, how much of money I've spent over there, how frequent I am over there. If it had to be something like an Amazon, am I a Prime member or not? So there are several things that go out, and we always kind of like really ignore it, and we say, okay, this information is publicly available, so what? But have you seen in the past like few years the number of spam mails, the number of SMSs, and the number of cold calls that you're getting? These are all based on these data breaches. Let me give you one very, very classic example of what happens when a data breach is done and what happens to you. Although when you say, okay, it's just my like name and other kind of things, there's a lot of profiling that is done. Now, this is something that's very important because there are these data analytic companies, there are these brand managers who they just look at your kind of profile, and then you are, there is like a targeted marketing over there. Secondly, if you know, many people, I think 1 in 5 have received an email saying that, the email says that I know this is your password. It also gives out your password. Now, and when you see your password in your subject line, you are like, of course, going to be taken aback. So what has happened over there? In that particular email, they are writing, we installed a malware. This is your password. We are aware about it. We have been tracing all your activities online. And while you were watching pornography, we started your web camera, and we recorded you also doing some act, and on the other side you were watching pornography. So we have a complete video of it. Trust me, there have been so many people who fell victims to this, and I can tell you that because I have handled 40 such cases, more than that maybe, wherein half of them have made a payment. There was a particular person who was at a very senior post in a very well-known bank. He fell prey to it. He came crying to me, and he said, like, if I'm not going to get a solution, I'm going to go and jump off. So this is like kind of the effect. Now, what had happened? How did they get the password? Now, several years back, there was a very big data breach of Zomato and LinkedIn. And when these breaches were there, even the password, which was stored in plain text at that point of time, had gone out. Now, all this information was dumped on the dark web. And it is because of that, the hackers found this gold mine, and they said, okay, instead of going and hacking one person at a particular point of time, they decided, let us make a script and send mass mails, and this particular thing worked. So this is called as a sextortion scam, and it has resulted because of a data breach. So, sir, this is one of the things among many several things that happened, but I wanted to highlight this thing which has like led people even to commit suicide and has led people to giving their money, and many of them have lost their job also. So this is one aspect of people of a data breach.
We'll come back to you. Now, Ritesh, during his talk, I introduced certain terms like profiling and target marketing. Mr. Sudarshan Mandyam, can you just explain to the audience what do we mean by profiling, and why is it a matter of concern to the privacy protection or data protection professionals?
Yeah. Thank you, Naavi, and thank you for this opportunity. Profiling is not always negative. You must remember that. One simple example is when we go and become a frequent flyer. When we say, I want a window seat, I want a vegetarian meal, I want an aisle seat, something we say that. And then when we actually book a ticket, we do get our choice. That's a one, I'm just trying to explain what's profiling from your side. But if you look at the negative aspects, for example, there is a mall where they have collected a lot of data, then they target only ladies who are between the age of 18 to 21. They want to sell cosmetic products, which sells very well. That's the type of profiling, the kind of profiling of particular people belong to a particular age and sex, and then their particular needs, no, dating. So profiling is something which is an offense under GDPR or any act, privacy act.
Okay. Mr. Limay, okay. Now,
Yes.
Mr. Ritesh also spoke of something called dark web. Can you just let us know a little more of what is this dark web and what is the value of this personal data which is being lost in our market? When it reaches dark web, what is the kind of values which are being talked about?
Yeah. First, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Data Protection Summit. To answer this particular question related to dark web, we can just understand what happens when a data is not officially sold or information is not officially available. There is some source of information where this sort of information is available unofficially. So in internet world, we use this particular technology which is known as dark web, where these sort of filthy or unwanted or dumped information is kept for some unwanted activities, or mostly criminals make use of that particular information. Since these spaces are used mostly by antisocials or criminals, it is termed as dark web. The amount of, say, information or the valuation of information basically depends upon various factors, like recent another breach of, say, Bharat Matrimony fraud or data of Bharat Matrimony. The company came with the explanation that it was past data, it was not of recent data, and it was of some previous year. But can the company say with authentication that all the data of the, say, customers of that particular year, they have married and they have not means have no use of that particular data? So valuation of the information which is residing in dark web is totally unimaginable. Means nobody can even evaluate the information. Like Ritesh just pointed out, the information of, say, LinkedIn information, LinkedIn passwords. Now when it is used for sextortion scam, it has got immense potential, because if some person is threatened with sextortion scam, he is willing to pay thousands or lakhs of rupees to save his reputation or identity. So basically the valuation of information, it is difficult to have one simple formula to imagine what could be the valuation of that particular information. Only we can conclude by saying that the information in my terms is infinite, because how the information can be exploited depends upon the mindset of the criminal. The way he will exploit that particular information, that will be the valuation of that particular information. So according to me, valuation is infinite, and rather it is pity that we have not able to imagine what sort of crimes would be happening if there is no protection for basic our payment card data, our health data, our personal data, and all these data is presently available in what is known as dark web or darknet. So infinity is the answer or the valuation.
Okay, thank you. Now, when we talk of this data, you use the term payment data or health data. Now, some of these losses have been of that kind of data. We have heard in the past that credit card data was being sold at $100 per set, and recent indications were that medical data was sold at $1,000 per set. So, you have indicated the specific cases where lakhs of rupees can be there. Now, I'll go back to Mr. Mandyam. Now, the data protection laws have tried to classify this personal data as simple personal data, then something called sensitive personal data, in which, say, financial data may be there or some other data may be there. And in India, we are also talking of something called critical data. Now, these classifications, Mr. Mandyam, can you just throw some light on what is the relevance of these classifications? Because depending upon the type of data, the interest of criminals would be higher in a particular data set. So whether this valuation, say, from a simple 1 rupee, 2 rupee per data set to say $100 or $1,000, does it get reflected when legislators try to define the type of data and what kind of security has to be in place for different kinds of data? Can you just explain on that classification of data systems?
Yeah, so particularly when in terms of keeping of records for processing of personal data, there are some differences. If someone is a doctor in a small clinic, only known patients come there, or somebody who's like you are thinking about your newsletter or FDPPI, sending it only those members who are known to you, then there, even if it is a personal data like a name, email ID, it doesn't become critical. But if it is a public hospital or places where they collect from multiple people, multiple localities, then it becomes critical, even if it is sensitive data, like somebody's health information, somebody's maybe political affiliation. Okay. These are all maybe salary details. Okay. They're all sensitive. So the moment you process sensitive data, even if it is a small organization, then the laws are very strict. If it is a normal data, then laws do not expect you to keep all the records. That is where in terms of keeping of records, there is a difference in that. So the term sensitive data used to be there in Data Protection Act 1998. Now they call it special data in the GDPR. And then some acts now use the term sensitive data. They call it special data, sensitive data. It does make a difference in terms of keeping of records. It does make a difference in terms of having a DPO or not. So then should you do a data protection impact assessment or not? For that also it affects. So there are some concessions given if you are processing a normal data. The moment you process even one sensitive data or what you call a special data, then you have to keep certain records and you are bound by some more rules. That's where they differentiate.
Okay. So the Indian data protection law actually recognizes certain data like financial data, health data, data related to caste, political opinions. They all are considered as sensitive data, which may be called special categories. It's a change of nomenclature. But there has been a discussion in India whether financial data has to be considered sensitive data or not. Mr. Ritesh, you have a view on that? Should financial data be considered as sensitive data?
Sir, again, as far as the financial data is concerned, now whether it includes my PAN number or it is my bank account number or bank details as such, or whether it's my balance, then if you see, I mean, there are two views to it. Now, for example, PAN number is something that's like actually kind of searchable also. If you are having like a private limited company and other kind of thing, it's also kind of certain things are searchable also. Your account number is not so kind of secretive because whenever you're issuing checks or getting payment, the account numbers are given. But sometimes what happens is, now for example, when we want to, like even in terms of investigations, when we are investigating certain things and all that, and the moment you find out the account number, then you start getting the branch, you get the you get the branch, you get the city, you also like do a little bit of OSINT, that is open source intelligence, and you are able to get some kind of address and all. So today, if you see, sir, open source intelligence or investigations using open source, which means for the viewers who don't know, for the participants who don't know, these are like tools which are available online for anybody. These are like not proprietary. With just basic knowledge, also you are able to get a lot more information about the other person. So in that particular case, if you ask me, then again, yes, if I have to come down to profiling and other kind of things, like right now also I'm working on a particular case wherein I'm able to profile the people, based on their income also using open source. So now this becomes quite risky. So if you ask me, yes, information like this needs to be like, a personal information. I'm not very sure if it has to be like again, under financial, there would be certain information that needs to be considered as sensitive information. But otherwise, definitely it is personal information.
Defining data as sensitive, what difference does it make? One is that certain processors for processing the sensitive personal data may be classified as significant data fiduciaries under the Indian law, whereas others are called only data fiduciaries. And significant data fiduciaries may be expected to have a better oversight in terms of having a data protection officer, creating a system of privacy by design, and a grievance redressal system, and maybe also whether the data should be processed within India or can it be taken outside India. So these are all the issues which actually determine whether a data is personal data or sensitive personal data. Mr. Lemay was talking about Bharat Matrimony. Bharat Matrimony information is all sensitive personal data because it not only contains the personal details like the name and address, height, weight, and other things, but a lot of profiling information like preferences of an individual, and ultimately any site which accepts payment will be having payment related data, your credit card number or bank account number. So these are all sensitive personal data, and by classifying something as sensitive, definitely it will afford a better security. Of course, in India, when we talk of say sexual orientation is one other aspect which every law says it should be considered as sensitive, and there are DNA kind of data, genetic data and DNA data, which is also considered sensitive personal information in almost all laws, like all biometrics are considered as that. But we have a peculiar situation in India where caste is classified as a sensitive personal information. I am not very sure whether it is possible for an organization to exercise better control on caste information, because many times our name itself is a reflection of our caste. So if I give my name, a company which is collecting only the name, no financial information or something, I will still classify them as a significant data fiduciary because you know my caste. Okay, because I am an Iyer or some Gowda or something of that nature. So by classifying caste, internationally, of course, racial differences, political opinions. I don't know, in India, there is no social media post which doesn't reflect a political opinion. So if we try to elevate some of these kind of data, like the political opinion and caste, into the sensitive category, we may be landing the companies into a situation where every data processor becomes a significant data fiduciary. So the issue is that though the law may give some concessions to somebody who is not a significant data fiduciary, because significant data fiduciary definition may come either because of the sensitivity of the data or because of the volume of the data. Somebody is having too much of data being processed, though it is not medical data, health data, still it is considered as significant data fiduciary. But there are smaller entities also. Of course, there may be some exemptions for smaller entities, but unfortunately, the exemptions for small entities are all restricted to manual processing. Today, there is no Indian company which is doing manual processing of personal data. So this elevation of some of this information, like racial information, political views, and caste, may perhaps provide some kind of a tight spot for the organizations, is what I personally feel. But anyway, we'll leave it that aside and then go back to this data breach incidents which we discussed. Out of the several data breach these things, can you, I think we'll have Ritesh talk about this. Can you typecast these different types of data breaches which we have seen? Whether they belong to the ransomware category, they belong to the category of corporate negligence, that is passwords were shared or password was not properly done. That kind of what falls into the category of negligence of a company causing a data breach, and what was a sophisticated cyber crime, some of which may be ransomware or whatever else is there. Can you just typecast these breaches?
Okay, so as far as the breaches are concerned, like you rightly said, one is definitely the carelessness. Okay, because this also comes under an insider. Now there is an insider that is like an employee of the company who's been just careless, having a poor security architecture, or he shared his password, or he just was logged in, he forgot to log out, or he used some other machine and other kind of things, and a data breach kind of a particular thing that has happened, and outside hacking has happened. And so this is a case of a negligence. There is an other aspect where there is a disgruntled employee who is like kind of selling out the data. So now this is happening quite a lot. If you ask me, especially during the lockdown, we are getting like many cases as far as these insiders threats are concerned, and a lot of this data leakage is happening. Thirdly, there is a corporate kind of the competitor kind of a thing, where the competitor is trying to get into the network of the other particular person to get the data. He takes the data, uses it for himself, and again also makes it public. So that is another one. And then if you look at one more category, I would say there are these state actors. So when we spoke about Dr. Reddy, when we spoke about Lupin, it is also possible that these are some state actors, hackers from other countries who are trying to get into the system, especially because of this vaccination thing. Everybody's trying hard to get the vaccine. So everybody wants to know what research which particular company is doing. So this is what is, so there are these state actors also. Then there is this new category of like the maze ransomware, wherein what has been ransomware been doing up till now? Up till now, ransomware, like in a few years back, 2 years back, what it would do, it would just come, attack your system, encrypt all the files, demand a ransom. Let's say if you have the data backup, you would say sorry, bye, and you would format your systems, and you would get your data back from all your backups and all. Now what they're doing, they're saying, they come, they attack your systems, they encrypt all your files. You say, okay, look, I don't want to pay because I have my files. He says, okay, if you don't pay me, I'm going to make your data public. And this is exactly what they're doing. So they start in one of the recent cases wherein they stole 1.5 GB of data, 1.5 terabytes of data. They started putting up like 200 GBs of data, in parts, to tell them, look, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And still the company didn't pay up. They says, okay, look, this is another batch. And this is what they're doing. So what is happening over here that, we've been only talking about cybersecurity and other kind of things. Now this is like the maze ransomware is kind of like a wake up call that, look, why data protection needs to be taken so very seriously. Even when you were talking about the caste and other things, the whole thing is, my question would be, why would you want to have a caste of somebody stored in your particular database? Even if you are a particular, whatever organization you are, unless you are a matrimonial, I can understand that. But over here, there also, you can kind of encrypt it. So everything that you see which is there needs to be like kind of salted, hashed, and put up or encrypted as such, so that even if there is a breach, people are not able to see it.
Okay. Thank you. Now, another aspect is you have been talking about cyber security, and even in today morning in the Bangalore Tech Summit, when Mr. Modi was speaking about security, he used the term cyber security and data security. They're two different kinds of security, and in fact, Karnataka government is also trying to have a cyber security policy for the state, and and government of India also has got a cyber security policy. So this cyber security and data security, can we make some kind of a distinction, Mr. Mandya?
Of course, cyber security is something that very few people, including me, have really understood. Whatever we don't, normally we use the term cyber in practice. We have to admit that cyber includes some information like a refrigerator controlled from outside, or nowadays they have a printer. Printer will have a sensor. The moment it goes below a certain level, automatically the order will be placed and somebody delivers the new cartridge. Okay, so these are all part of cyber where it need not be a personal information. It may be some information about the equipment, something. Cybersecurity is about something like SCADA systems in a power station, or it could be some PCL system, no? Information engineering is full of cyber items. So they need not contain any personal information. Forget personal, normal personal information they may not contain. So this particular PDPA applies to only data which pertains to an individual and a living person. It's not about machine, it's not about the balance sheet figures of a company. It's not about other information about equipment or other things.
Okay, so you are suggesting that cyber security will address the security of personal data and non-personal data. Non-personal data will contain corporate data, whereas the personal data security, as the term as we have defined, of course, people may always have different things. Let us define that data security is personal data security because the laws are coming. Now we are looking at personal data, which may be ordinary personal data, sensitive personal data, critical personal data. There are different characterization within that. Now, Mr. Limay, in terms of our current laws, which is cyber crime laws, Information Technology Act, which punishes cyber crimes through Section 43, Section 66, and related things. And now, of course, after 2008 amendment, 43A, 72A, and so on. Does Information Technology Act make any distinction between the data breach of a personal data and data breach of a corporate data?
Basically, Section 43, when it was introduced, it took care of the breach of information possessed by corporates. So any information which is possessed by corporate or which is handled by corporate, and if that information got compromised, then the person whose information is compromised or who suffered the loss or unfair gain with that particular information could gain the relief from the provisions of Information Technology Act. But previously to 2008, Section 43 was related to only illegal access to particular system. So when if access is not with the permission of owner and something happened, then only those provisions were available as far as Section 43 is concerned, or in the extended form Section 66 is concerned. But when we specifically talk about data breach or loss of data from particular organization, corporates are only responsible for possessing, handling, or processing of that particular information. But Section 43A does not take care of government organizations. It has specifically excluded governments from the provisions of Section 43A. And what we presently seeing that most of the data is also residing with government organizations, and the data can be compromised from government organizations also. So the present form of act is extension of Section 43A, because Section 43A does not protect also means PDPA bill does not protect government from this sort of loss of information, which facility or which protection was available under Information Technology Act. So when we talk about data protection, there are provisions under present Information Technology Act, but here provisions are restricted or limited to the person who has suffered the loss. Because I don't think, or I haven't come across any case where person who has gained unfair advantage has used Section 43A, that due to breach of this particular confidential information, I have gained this much profit, and now that particular organization should be penalized. So only the person who has suffered some losses due to 43A, that individual can get the relief, and that too from corporates. So to address your question, present PDPA must come in force as soon as possible, because it gives wide coverage to protection of personal data. Because what has happened, that everybody is talking about data security, but we have not understood what exactly data security means. Whatever smallest information which we disseminate is converted for the benefit of some criminal, and he exploits that particular information. So when PDPA will be a reality, the bearer or the holder of that particular information, or in that particular manner, what we can say as a data principal, will have certain right about that particular information, whether right to forgotten or right to be deleted of that particular information. That rights will be available, which are not presently available in the present set of Information Technology Act.
Okay, so what you are saying is section 43 covered diminishing the value of information inside a computer. So by that definition was able to cover all aspects of data breaches, but there had to be a person with a wrongful loss and a person with a wrongful gain so that it could be settled. And of course, section 66 attached to that made that a criminal provision also. Now, section 43A brought in the change where that an organization which is handling personal data, which is of sensitive nature, because 43A covers only sensitive personal data. If an organization handling sensitive personal data fails to follow the reasonable security practices, it becomes liable to pay the damages. It was mentioned there. And as you pointed out, it applies to body corporates. Body corporates, by definition, included the partnership firms or proprietary concerns and other things, but government was something which could be considered out of it. Now, when Personal Data Protection Act is coming, 43A of IT Act is getting deleted. That is, it is being replaced with the Personal Data Protection Act, and Personal Data Protection Act makes it applicable to both government and non-government organizations. So that is one improvement in terms of the new act which will be coming up. Okay, now we talked about this lockdown kind of a thing. Now, this work from home situation, has it actually added to the problems of two things? One, in terms of security, another in terms of privacy. Okay, so first we'll talk about cyber security very briefly. How work from home has become a new challenge for cyber security, Ritesh?
I think it's become like a very big challenge, and a lot many breaches have also happened as a result of that. Because if you see, like, you know, when you take your device, or when you're going to your office and working, and let's say you're sitting on your particular terminal, those terminals are like well guarded. You know, there are firewalls in place, everything is there. And whereas, like, you know, now you come home and you're working from home, and let's say even if the company, you know what like what had happened even in during the lockdown, the companies had to like kind of buy the laptops, like, you know, very urgently, and they bought the laptops or they have rented the laptop, and they haven't been able to put all those systems in place as such. Like, for example, they just put up like a basic, you know, I would say an antivirus and other kind of thing. But then there were a lot many controls also that they had to put up, which they weren't able to do it. So everything was going on trust. So, you know, so this is now one machine wherein the particular person is, you know, using it for personal things also, and as far as the kind of for work related also. So now, you know, most of you must have seen that in an organization, like you may not be able to access, let's say, social media, or you may not be able to access, let's say, online gambling sites, or even you know, stock exchange or anything like that. You might not. They must have put over all the firewalls, but here there were no restrictions for some reason. And now then there were also cases where like the family members were also excited and they were using the machine, the devices when the spouse was not working. Sometimes the kids were using it, and now, you know, you downloaded something because of which a malware has also got installed. So there have been like a lot many such instances because of which devices not only like kind of malfunction, but of course they were like kind of corrupted also. Yeah, I don't see any kind of like a data theft happening because of these actions, but yeah, the data theft became easier because now you're working from home. So when you were in the office, you were not allowed to access that particular, you know, when you were sending out an email, you could not send it to a Gmail, you could not use your Gmail. But now using the same computer, you're able to access your official email ID also, as well as your like a personal Gmail ID. So a lot of like data theft has happened by the employees themselves during this work from home situation.
Okay.
Naavi.
So you're talking of increase in the insiders threat.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
when we talk of cyber security, we are basically talking of protecting the information. Okay, so when you extend it to privacy protection, one part of privacy protection is the privacy related information, that is your personal information, name, address, etc., etc. That also is information. It needs to be protected from confidentiality, integrity, availability kind of a thing. But privacy protection, which is what we are discussing as data protection, goes beyond the CIA principle, confidentiality, integrity, availability principle of information, because of certain additional features. Now, Mr. Mandyam, when we talk of privacy, what are the additional features which get added to information security and make it bigger than information security? Like the consent, that kind of a thing, rights of the data subjects. These are all things which information security people don't know.
Okay, so I recently completed 3 audits in 3 different countries for various regulations. No, one of them was GDPR, then was the Nigerian regulation, and then of course you can say the old IT Act. So different scenarios. So the difference I find in terms of implementing, they call it as technical and organizational measures. The technical measures are the cyber security, like a firewall, IDS, and encryption, and other things. The organizational measures are policies and procedures. One of them is work from home. What happens? There is a lot of shoulders. We do audit. We find family members coming and supplying a cup of tea or coffee. Able to see the screen. So that type of restriction is not there. No, when we work from home, we have to be very honest. Some things do not work the way it works in an office. But where I find a difference in terms of implementing privacy is, we normally do the privacy management system. One of them is the normal CIA triad. Those who know that, they only deal with the employees. Normally within the IT department, sometimes maybe HR department, legal, they rarely go to even the other department. When it comes to a privacy setup, they have to interact with the data subject, or what you call it, the data principal. That is not a culture in us. We have to learn. So everywhere we find a non-conformance in this area, that they do very well. In terms of communication, there's a lot of gap. Communication with the employees, normally with IT people, is very easy because they're also from IT. Communicating even with the other departments in IT is a bit difficult with some of the manage, but communicating with the data subject, everything you have to communicate. Maybe there's a website, you have to give an update, you have to publish the privacy policy, then you have to have an opt-in situation. So dealing with the public, soft skills are required for a person who's used to the cyber security. It's still a challenge for an IT person to develop those soft skills to deal with the public. That's one of the reasons probably data protection officers are not to be from IT or CISO, but from the legal and HR department who have the soft skills to deal with the data subject. Definitely, I see a lot of challenges here in protecting privacy. With someone who is just familiar with the CIA, he should also learn something about privacy, but I don't think he'll be able to do it alone. He has to actually coordinate with somebody who has the soft skills to deal with the public. Dealing with the public, you need a lot of patience. You need to be a very good human being to talk to different people. So I keep saying the IT people are used to the communicating with IP addresses only of machines. Whereas you have to be able to communicate with IP addresses as well as human beings. That's a big challenge, definitely, with privacy.
In fact, we are going to have one session exclusively on the DPOs, how to be a DPO kind of thing. Now, see, one of the other things which we wanted to discuss was that, okay, the CIA triad covers information security, but when it comes to privacy, which has to be secured, then we are adding on to the information security certain principles like, now most of these privacy laws says that before you collect a personal information, you should get what is called a consent. That is, you should first of all give a notice to the person saying that what is the information I am collecting from you, why I am collecting it from you, how long I am going to keep it with me, how I am going to process it, am I going to send it to some XYZ as my subcontractor. So all this information which we have to actually add and give a notice to the person. Please give me your information. I am going to handle it like this kind of a thing. Then this person, after understanding this, should give an informed consent. Okay, so he has to give a consent. Now, getting a consent online is not an easy job because law has got its own perception about what is a signature. For example, in India, we don't require, consider a tick of a box or something like that as equivalent to a signature. So most of the time, under Indian law at least, which recognizes only digital signature as the type of authentication, we take the consents like a deemed consent, you can say. Okay, there's an intention to give consent, but if you go to a court of law, whether the page with a I accept button having been clicked, because the organization will say this person clicked this. Now that person says, no, I did not click. So that is a dispute which law has to decide. Of course, the law will say that it should have been digitally signed. If it is not digitally signed, let us forget whether it is a written this thing or not. We will consider it as a deemed consent. Okay. Now, an organization therefore has to give a notice, get a consent, and most of these laws say the onus of proving that a consent has been obtained lies with the organization. The data subject, which we in India will call him as a data principal. Now, data principal can always deny that I never gave a consent. It is for the organization to prove that a consent was obtained. So the evidence has to be kept by the organization, for which, of course, India has got its own laws. One is the digital signature, which I said is essential. Otherwise, there is a section 65B certification, which is required. So they are very complicated thing. Most of the companies don't even know how to use section 65B certification for obtaining a consent. They're just assuming that whatever happens in Europe or something like that, or even in US, where click wrap contracts are considered acceptable, India also should accept it. But an Indian judge may say that whatever US does is for them, and we are not recognizing click wrap contracts. Then all these companies will have great difficulty in proving that a consent has been obtained. But anyway, this consent mechanism sits over the CIA of personal information, so makes privacy protection more complicated than information security. One. Second is, most of these laws are today talking of providing some rights to the data subjects or data principals. This concept of giving a right is something new. In the earlier OECD guidelines and other things, we didn't talk about rights. Okay, it said the company has to protect, take consent, etc. But when it comes to rights, today we are talking of right to access, right to correction, which are reasonable. That is, if I have given you some information, please keep it accurate. Otherwise, you will get some wrong impressions about my profile. So right to access, right to correction. Then this GDPR added the right to portability and right to forget, which are the things which are creating a lot of problems, because what is right of portability? The data principal or the data subject can ask this organization, I had given you some information last year, you had made some process of that, perhaps you have created a beautiful profile of me, which you have sold to the American Election Authority, or some political parties made money. So you have actually created some value out of this thing. Now, I want to withdraw my consent. Please return whatever information you have built on my personal information. Okay. So that is right to portability, and either to return the information back to the same data subject, or I may say that please transfer this from X company to Y company. So I can port it to another organization or to myself. And this right to portability not only includes, in most of the cases, the information which has been provided by the data subject to the data fiduciary or the controller, but also the inferences which have been drawn by the company, which we called as profiling earlier, which are actually some value created out of the intellectual capital of the organization. Okay, so this is another aspect. And when you call about right to forget, of course, Indian law has made a small distinction between GDPR and this. In India, right to forget is not like an absolute right, because if there is a request for right to forget, it has to be approved by an adjudicator. So there is one level of, you can say, control which has been provided. But otherwise, right to forget means that the company should destroy all the information which a person has given to him. The only other option available to the company is to justify that for its legitimate interest, it cannot accept this request to forget, but archive it in some manner or something like that. So this right to portability, right to forget, and right to access and correction, this set of rights, along with the need for notice and consent, make privacy protection a much larger responsibility than information security. That is one view. Okay. Mr. Mandyam, do you agree with my viewpoint on that?
Correct. So we have to give a, say, like what they call as a ballpark estimate. If information security management system takes about 3 months, implementing privacy over that will take at least another 3 months. The main thing is analyzing the data at various stages, like create, use, store, destroy. So that's a big job. So they take a long time to analyze, where data is going and from where data is coming, where it is stored. So there it does take a time, a bit of a time to do the analysis of data, particularly for privacy data.
Okay. Now we will take just one more topic before we go into the questions of which are there in the chat box. This question was that you know that personal data protection legislation, we are talking of PDPA, talks of a category of people called consent managers. Say, knowing fully well that in India, consent cannot be obtained by a properly signed document, which is a difficulty which has to be addressed. And also India has got this problem of languages. There are multiple languages, and if I have a privacy policy written in English, whether it will be understood by all the people, we do not know. So therefore, to address these challenges of one, not being able to get anything other than a deemed consent online, and second, we have the problem of you can say masses who are less educated in general, and also culturally not knowing much about privacy. There is a need for some intermediary who can assist the data principals to provide, give him a guidance on what kind of consents are being asked by XYZ and whether you should give it or not. Because we know in mobile particularly, the apps permissions, nobody understands why a particular set of permissions are all required, but an ordinary mobile user, India, we talk of very high level of penetration as far as the mobile is concerned, which means that it is very tough to actually get a really appropriate consent. Okay. So there is a system of consent managers. Now, in the financial system already, we have got something called an account aggregator, which Reserve Bank of India has suggested, that there will be an intermediary who will be perhaps getting all the information from different financial resources and then use it. Now, I want Ritesh to just briefly talk about this system of account aggregators in the financial system, and to what extent they actually appear to be similar to the consent managers. Okay. So the system of account aggregators.
Sir, I'm really sorry, but I lost my connection, so I have no idea what you've spoken and what you've been
Okay.
I'm so sorry about it. If somebody else can.
It's fine. We'll come back to that. Can Lemaye talk anything about this account aggregators?
Yeah, basically what it could be related with consent manager is the person having knowledge of that particular field is supposed to be the best person to guide or advise that set of people. So the consent of people who are not aware that what information should be given to that particular app or that particular service provider is understood better by the person who is knowledgeable in that particular field. Like Naavi sir was talking about account aggregator, or various banks come up with this concept of financial advisor. So they advise that particular person how to invest his funds, etc., etc. So here, what information will cause what damage to that particular person should be known by that particular person. Presently, what is happening? There is a trap. Unless you accept entire terms and conditions, that app is not available for use. So there is no selectivity that yes, I accept these terms and conditions. I don't accept for these terms and conditions. So when concept of this consent manager will come, people will know what their rights are, how much they want to expose their information, what could be the threat to their information. So it is better to have this sort of concept like consent manager, because due to aggregator concepts, many people understood about financial significance. What could be the financial, say, advantages of having that particular concept? Similar concept, when it is implemented in PDPA, will benefit data principals in huge manner. So to correlate these two particular concepts, it is just to sum up, a advisor in that particular field advising people how to use that particular resources. That much what I can say about these correlating two concepts.
Okay. Fine. In my view, actually, this consent manager is a great idea which has been brought into the Personal Data Protection Act. In some countries like USA, the word, another kind of word called data broker has been used, but the data broker is a different person who actually takes data for profitable, you can say, manipulation. But the concept of consent manager is like a data fiduciary who actually is a custodian of the personal data of a group of people, and as a custodian will help the data principals to understand the privacy requirements and what they should protect, how they should protect. In fact, this person, in my view, it's a big business opportunity for consent management. I think this is not the forum to discuss that. It is a startup business. If somebody in the Bangalore tech startup area wants to discuss, that is a separate thing we can discuss. But GDPR does not specifically talk about that kind of an intermediary. So, Mr. Sudarshan, have you come across this consent manager concept in GDPR?
It's not consent manager. What they talk about is the government must provide for some sort of a legal aid, not for profit, funded by them. Not about consent manager. It's
here in India,
somebody wants,
here in India, consent manager can be a business who is a data fiduciary. He is a data fiduciary between the data fiduciary who uses the information and the data principal who supplies the information. So he's an intermediary data fiduciary, and ultimately it will become a joint data fiduciary in the whole process or whatever is that. But
something better than GDPR.
So that is an improvement, particularly in terms of lower education, language, and other issues. I don't know how to vet the permission requirement. So if privacy policy, I don't know what to say, yes or no, because I can't even read that 2 pages at a time when I'm just clicking on something. That is one. That consent fatigue is there everywhere. But even if I'm taking the trouble of reading it, whether I will understand it or not is a question. So this consent manager becomes a helpful feature.
Correct. In fact, Dr. Limay said it right. No, he said it is similar to the financial planner, no, certified financial planner, so independent of the bank.
Yeah.
It's a very good concept. It's like that.
Yes, good. And now we'll take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. One question from Mr. Kumar. If PDPA highlights some commonalities of HIPAA GDPR, it will help the Indian IT and ITES companies to follow the unified compliance framework within the organization. The integrated legal compliance framework should guide the organizations to meet the international and our Indian requirements. I will answer this because we are having a separate session on this. The last session on PDPA in our listing, we are going to discuss not only this concept of a unified platform for compliance, but also how it can be done. And FDPPA has got some stake in developing this. I will discuss this, Mr. Kumar, please, and do attend our last this thing. But of course, the PDPA as an act need not highlight. It talks about the same thing like other things like what is a personal information, what is a sensitive personal information, what are the obligations of the companies, what are the rights of the companies, whether there are restrictions on transfer, and of course penalties. It will talk about all these things which are there. In fact, out of all these things, HIPAA is an important thing because HIPAA actually gave a list of security guidelines with implementation specifications. Whereas other legislations, including GDPR, we have said that these are the things to be done, but how it is to be done, you have to determine. That is what a particular security article will have to say. So PDPA also does not give prescriptions, but it is possible that the Data Protection Authority may come up with codes and practices. In the codes and practices, he may give a little more technical details, particularly for different industry groups. Of course, in India, we already have sectoral controllers or the regulators like RBI, SEBI and others who have given their own set of guidelines. For general purpose, for example, today CERT-In has given security guidelines for two categories of people. One is the cyber cafes, another is the matrimonial sites. Maybe in the days to come, the codes and practices issued by the Data Protection Authority of India, which will come after PDPA, it will address having individual frameworks for different kinds of industries, and there perhaps this possibility of identifying what PDPA requires and how it can be unified can be worked at. But one more thing I want to highlight here, because many of the security people have this confusion. When we talk of HIPAA, GDPR, and let us say Indian PDPA, we are really talking of each of these laws being applicable to different types of data. For example, GDPR applies to EU data. It doesn't apply to the people sitting in Bangalore giving our information to the Bangalore Tech Committee or something like that. Whereas HIPAA applies to the health information flowing from the covered entity in US. So there's really not a great overlap if you really know how to actually segregate and classify the data, and that is what our PDPSI system will be doing. So we will discuss that later on. Okay, now the next question. One is there any change envisaged in the RTA Act based on new PDPA? Mr. Limaye, do you have a view on that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
So changes in RTA Act because there are a lot of skills. I don't foresee.
Yeah. So of course, in the 2018 version of the PDP bill, there was a provision to bring some clarifications to what happens to a right to information query. Because if somebody is, I'm an organization, like an information officer, and you send me a request for information, but if I feel that giving that information to you will be harmful to, say, Limaye or somebody else whose information is also with me, then the right to information should be moderated because of this. That is, the whoever is the information officer had to take a view that release of information does not harm anybody else. What the earlier version of the bill, which was also approved by Justice Sri Krishna, stated was that this information officer, when he gets a request with this conflict, should conduct something like an internal assessment, document it, saying that if I release this, whether there is going to be a significant harm to anybody else, and document it and then take a decision. But somehow people did not like interfering with the RTI Act, because people who are objecting did not understand the objective of this. So they raised an objection that how can you touch RTI Act, though it did not do anything different from what was earlier there. But anyway, that provision was withdrawn. So as of now, this does not affect the RTI Act. However, we must understand that as per the Supreme Court guidelines, right to privacy is a fundamental right accepted, but reasonable restrictions can still be there for right to privacy. And reasonable restrictions can be if there is a requirement, need for somebody else for that information, either under the right to information or under right to freedom of speech, etc. This point came up for discussion when this Arogya Setu app was debated. Say government said that whoever wants to return to employment should have installed this Arogya Setu app, so that your co-employee will know whether you are a person who had come in contact with a COVID person yesterday, day before yesterday, or within 1 week. That was the intention of that. But everybody said, no, no, you cannot do that. There's a privacy violation. This was actually necessary for protecting the interest of your neighbor. If you come near me, I have got the right to know whether it is dangerous for me. And so Arogya Setu app meant for that. So this kind of difficulty in understanding the concept sometimes arises, and the controversies surrounding personal data legislation always has this kind of a issue. Okay. If anyone else wants to add any questions, please do so. Audience, please write it down so that we will have less of noise. That's all. Okay. With the challenges of PDPB, this is from Harsh Kaur. With challenges of PDPB adoption in terms of user consent, language, etc., coupled with the WHO requirement making data protection to advise corporate. Corporates need to devise a methodology to meet these requirements. I am sure that there is a way out of this. As I told you, consent manager concept is there in the law. Then work from home. We are, in fact, we have actually given some thoughts to that. And even if you want to have more information, you have that information available in my site, naavi.org also. So work from home is here to stay, at least for at least another 1 year. I think more than 50% of employees will be working from home. Cybersecurity issues will remain because, as Ritesh was telling, the network is going to be through the open network. And this shoulder surfing is there. Now we are facing similar issues in the examination system, proctoring. Say now many of the organizations wants the video proctoring of people, okay, when taking examination. What does it mean? That there will be a video surveillance on the person all around himself, whether anybody is coming near or he's looking at Google and typing something, or whether he's wearing any earpieces. So proctoring is going to be another area of concern. But now look at the requirement of the university. Now, if you want to do an examination and you don't want to allow copying, etc., proctoring you have to do. Now, of course, in FDPPA, what we have done is we have adopted the online multiple choice questions for the certification programs, and it is more like an open book. If you want to check on any book, you do it, but most probably you will come with the wrong answer because the questions will be tricky enough to test your application of the law rather than the actual law. So the universities, if they change their system of examination from asking or fill up the blanks and memory-based questions to the knowledge-based questions or interpretation-based questions, then they will not need proctoring at all. Okay, or whatever is required can be limited proctoring. So corporates need to look at changing their business methods to some extent. And see, after all, what we are talking of is not network security, we are talking of data security. So you have remote login kind of a systems like Citrix and other things. Try to use many of that. And legally also you have to protect through proper policies and documentations, ethical undertaking from the employees. So these are some of the things which I think should be discussed in greater detail on a customized basis depending upon each company. Okay, a few other quickly. I think we have come to the end of our allotted time. So let us quickly look at other 2-3 questions.
Naavi sir, I need to get on to another session, so if you can
I understand.
grant me a leave.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ritesh,
Thank you so much, sir.
adding value.
Thank
to it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Ritesh.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Limay. Thank you, Madhyam sir.
Yeah. Another question. All corporates have to adopt, okay, challenges will be enormous, but by C-level executives need to start working as soon as possible. Yes, I take it as a good observation. Consent manager is a great business. Muthukumar Vaidyanathan says something like Google autofill, okay, repository. Now, say this artificial intelligence, this IoT, these are all things which are adding more to this privacy issues. There will be some other day, perhaps we will discuss more on how Alexa will be responsible for privacy breach or something like that, or a Siri or something like that. And today, most of both Apple and Microsoft vie with each other for cloud storing of whatever you do on your computer. So there are a lot of industry-wise issues. Let us see. Okay, fine. I think if there are no other questions, can we have the last word from our panel members, Mandyam and then Mahendra? Yeah, Mr. Mandyam.
Yeah, so we started with the topic of security breaches. The organization's approach to this compared to a normal CIN or ISMS approach, there is something which is added here. One of them is reporting security breaches to the ultimate data protection authority. The other one is reporting security breaches to the data subject. We are not used to this reporting to 2 different people. That's where I think we still have to do a lot of homework, and then we have to understand that we are still learning, still in the learning stage. Okay.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And that is about the topic itself. In between, you mentioned about the way assessments are done. If it is not about just about recall, so there is some concept known as the Bloom's taxonomy. So our still at level 1 or level 2. We have to reach, there are 6 levels. We have to reach at least level 3 and 4. So I think that will be a solution. Even if it is an education about data privacy breaches, we should have questions which actually test exact scenario and say, whom are you reporting and what is the time limit for reporting? That type of question we should have in our assessment.
Okay, thank you. Lemay, you have any final word or comment?
Yeah, a small word. That to continue further, that when we talk about data breach, we must understand the consequences of that particular data breach and how it will affect our day-to-day activity. Unless we understand the significance of data, we cannot understand this particular subject, which is a movement started by PDPA. So each and every participant of this particular seminar should transmit this particular message, that what could be the consequences of data breaches and how we should be careful, or how we should take protection of our data, and what could be the consequence of breaching if these sort of situations happen. Say health data compromises, what could be the damages we will require to pay, and we have understood all these things in this particular situation of COVID. Because just a small example, that now each and every company asks for your insurance cover. Whenever anybody is admitted to hospital, they are after your insurance cover. And if that particular data breach happens, all hospital knows about your insurance cover. People or hospital people will be after you because you are celebrity, insured for that particular value, and everybody knows what that business is happening. So the broad message is data is very valuable, and we must have this particular data protection act in place, and we should strive hard to get this particular data protection act for ourselves. So this data protection movement should be of each and every participant and every of us who is giving this sort of data to various companies. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, Samavita. We will actually continue some of these discussions. We have only started our discussions on PDPA in this session. We are in our next session, we will be looking at a comparison between PDPA and GDPR, where again we will be taking up many of the other issues, and then we'll be going into the DPO, cross-border transfer, data trust score, and PDPSI. So we have got a lot more to discuss on PDPA. So I don't think that we have exhausted everything in this session. If we have left out any questions unanswered, it will be carried over. Okay, Samavita. Yeah. Now your voice is not coming through, Samavita.
Okay, so the next session is on PDPA of India, is not clone of GDPR, which is at 4 o'clock. We would request everyone to be there for the session and would request Vasantika Srinath to give the vote of thanks. Over to you, Vasantika.
Thanks, Sayogita. This has been a very, very interesting session, and I think it's a very great start we have made to our first India Data Protection Summit. And it's a great time to also be co-hosted along with the BTS 2020. We've had some great points made by the panelists, very eye-opening on the effects of data breach. In India, we are not used to many of these concepts, and suddenly the law is going to change that for us. So so it has been, so thank you, Dr. Limay, thank you, Mandayam, and Ritesh was not here, and Naavi sir for
Okay, thank you. And all the participants, if you have more questions, you are always welcome to contact us. If you are in BTC, please visit our stall. There also you can raise questions through whatever means have been provided. We will be very happy to provide clarifications even subsequently also, and through our FDPPA website also we may provide more clarifications. So don't stop here. This is consider this as a starting point for an exploration of the Personal Data Protection Act. And my personal request is don't be guided by any rumors in the media and other things that PDPA is bad. That is these are all things which happen whenever a new law comes. There is an explanation. That is why I said that stakeholders include the government, includes the business. So we cannot kill Google and Facebook and then say that the internet will develop. Internet would not develop to the current extent if some of these companies were not there. So we have to find a way out of whatever differences we have got, rather than killing the business, because if you kill business, then all of us will lose our employment also. That also we must remember. So if data has got a value, that is why India is coming up with the Non-Personal Data Governance Act. Please remember that when Non-Personal Data Governance Act comes, most of the concerns people have about the misuse of personal data by business will be sorted out, because we are introducing this anonymization in between personal data and non-personal data, and we will make information available for commercial exploitation when it is no longer a personal data, when any individual's privacy is not affected. So India is one of the first countries or early nations to take up this non-personal data protection legislation as a sequel to this Personal Data Protection Act. So participants who have got their own apprehensions about this act, please remember that there is no need to be doubtful about what will be the impact of this. We have waited for years for Personal Data Protection Act to come in India, and we should ensure that it is implemented, and there will always be time for modifications through the regulations and other things coming through the DPA to fine-tune the act. So that is where we will close this session now. We will have about 5-10 minutes break, and we will start our next session at exactly 4 o'clock. We have got about 8 minutes break. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.